Forgot which church I'm at. Okay, at Go Church Spring Hill. So let's see. Not a lot of them are in here right now, but Ella, I'm gonna have you come up here for a second. Come here. You're gonna be my representative for all the middle and high schoolers that are working in Go Kids. So I don't know if you know this, but we have a whole lot of kids here. In fact, over a quarter, usually about a third of our population on a Sunday morning is made up of 5th grade and under. That's a lot of children. Hey. Good job, everybody. But that means that we need a lot of people to come and serve and volunteer and disciple these kids, basically. And so Ella, Donovan, Madison Lou, they give up a lot of time and energy to be there for these kids, to build relationships, to love on these kids in and out and all the time. So, high five. Good job. I also have a gift card that I want to give you. You want Sweet Card or Target?
Oh.
You can pick.
Take Target.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
All right. So remember, if you come work for my ministry, I give away money. So, Another couple I want to point out today, because we also have several students here who have additional needs. And so we have a special support team who regularly come in and work alongside our kids who have autism, and that is the cells. So cells, they're right over here. I just want to say a big thank you to you guys, because honestly, this takes a lot of patience and a lot of extra love. And it's amazing to see them in there. They come in every other week to hang out with Ricky and Blake and just love on them. So thank you so much for what you do. So I think all the Go Kids are ready to go for the most part, but if you're in elementary or preschool, you can head to the door.
Yeah, as soon as those kids see that sign, like, booked it, ready to go. Goodness. Well, good to be with you guys. As always, love being with you and excited to kind of jump into some new content. We've been thinking through what discipleship means. If you've been a part of CCW before, you've heard that question plenty of times. And so we're talking about the rise and the fall of the kingdom of Israel. And that's a lot of history and a lot of details in there. If you've been reading the Bible with us, some of that stuff gets difficult. We kind of looked at Judges and some of the choices that we shouldn't make. And we're going to look at 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and some of these crazy stories of things that we definitely shouldn't do. And so sometimes it's nice to look at some things that we ought to do. And so this month we're going to look at some do's and don'ts of discipleship. But really for me, I think I just always want to know how to do relationships better, because I mess up often, right? Like, it's easy to do the face-to-face in life with your friends, with your family, the wrong way. And so there are some pointers in this phenomenal book that we're going to talk about this morning that should give us some things that will help us in our relationships with other people, because I know I could use that help, and we're created to be in relationship with others. And so, man, this book intentionally is put right smack dab in the middle of the craziness in the Old Testament. 4 short chapters. The book of Ruth is a phenomenal story. In fact, a lot of people, this is kind of cool, Benjamin Franklin was with a group of people. It was a group of infidels. That was kind of a name they wanted to carry, which says a little bit about who they were. And so they were kind of studying some great stories together. And so he brought this short story to them to read together. And they thought it was one of the best, most well-written stories ever. And they wanted to know where he got the book, or where he got the story from. And he let them know it was the book of Ruth from the Bible, and they were floored by that and couldn't believe it. And so sometimes the work of the authors and the way these words come together are just phenomenal. So this book is, an incredible book, and I just kind of want to walk through that with you. So if you haven't heard the book of Ruth before, if you have, just kind of sit back and listen to this pretty unique, pretty incredible story that just kind of hides itself right in the middle of all these wars, all these struggles, and that maybe, just maybe, we might learn a little bit about how to be more intentional in our relationships through this. And so the 4 chapters, again, if you've read it, correct me where I'm wrong and get a chance to look at this later, because there's a lot of stuff in this book. But the setting's pretty unique and pretty devastating, because it introduces this family. They have this wonderful marriage together. Naomi is the main character in chapter 1, and she is someone that is got a husband. She's got 2 sons. She's doing pretty well, and both the sons marry. They marry one girl, Oprah, and Ruth, and so they're starting to live life together. And the husband, he dies, and so Naomi is now a widow, which in first century is definitely not a good situation to be in. And then a year after that, both of her sons die, and so now it's Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law. In the first century Jew, that's not a good position to be in. For anybody to lose their husband and then to lose both of their sons, that would be devastating as it is. But for a woman in the first century to lose her husband, now kind of the question of where she gets her income and how she's going to sustain life and do really anything is really questioned. What normally would happen in this scenario is that she would go live with her sons, and she did that. But then when both of her sons die, now she's left with nothing, right? This is a bad situation for her. And so the two daughters-in-law, she's right there with them, and she's just overwhelmed with tears and kind of characterized by a woman that weeps. In fact, Naomi, through this process of losing her family, changes her name. She says, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, because I'm bitter to the core. And so that word means bitter. Changes her name because she's so overwhelmed by the situation. And she feels like God has abandoned her in this situation, that there's very little hope for her now. And so she goes to her two daughters-in-law and says, listen, it will be better for you to go back home. Your only opportunity if you stay with me is that I could marry, and if I even get lucky enough because I'm older and it's just going to be a rough situation, I could have kids, and then you would have to wait for them to get older for you to marry them. Like, there's very little logical reason that you would stay with me. It would be better for you to go back home. I am angry, I'm overwhelmed, but I want what's good for you, and I feel like I can't give you that. I want something better for you than what just happened to me. And so one of the daughters, she leaves. But Ruth, this other character we get to learn about, she does something very remarkable. In fact, I don't completely understand why she makes this choice. But she says to Naomi, again, who's a widowed mother that offers very little as far as sustainability and income and safety, and it's just a rough situation. And Ruth says to her that, very powerful in the first chapter of Ruth, that, listen, yeah, wherever you go, I'm going to go. Wherever you stay, I'm going to stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God, and nothing will separate us. It makes this overwhelming commitment to her, to be connected to Naomi no matter what happens. And I'm just blown away, and I still really don't know what would drive a person to do that, to make that kind of commitment, knowing that any relationship with Naomi is probably not going to end very well because there's not a whole lot of benefit that Ruth gets by having that relationship. And so I even wonder why she would do that. And here's the other thing too, is that she was a Moabite and Naomi wasn't. Naomi was an Israelite. She was a Jew, and she worshiped Jehovah God. She worshiped our God like we do. And so she's considering a whole big change of life, specifically her relationship with what would be God. Now, why she chooses that, I don't completely understand. But one of the things I think is very cool and unique about this is that Naomi is going through tragedy beyond what I can comprehend. But she wants what's best for Ruth. And so in whatever love she has left inside of her, she wants her daughter-in-law to be better off. And offers, hey, you'd be better if you leave. Let me give whatever kindness and fortune I can give to you before you go. And Ruth, I think, if I can look into the text a little bit, I think that's meaningful, because I noticed that in my life, where when someone cares for me, that makes me want to know where that care comes from, right? When someone gives an unconditional love, then it makes you wonder what that is all about. And in fact, I think for us, the way we help people see who God is by the way we treat them. If we treat them in a way that's harsh and judgmental and cold, then they're going to have a very difficult time seeing who our God is and why it would be worth their time. But if we treat people in the way that we've been treated by our God, then I think that gets their attention. And even more so, I see that really develop with the two of them, because there's this very deep friendship. There's this commitment to each other, and a lot of things happen in that relationship. And Naomi starts to have an influence on Ruth, and Ruth is getting to this place where she says, that is my God. Like, this is what I want to be a part of. And so I think something happens there, maybe not necessarily for the two of them, but I have seen in me and I have seen in you where in our relationships, if you want to project the gospel, I think in a deep friendship where you can speak truth and you get to those good conversations, where there's those friendships that you have in life that you're committed to each other, is a deep friendship that's surrounded by unconditional love, that is the loudest platform you have to tell people about Jesus. By far. In a deep friendship where it is surrounded by unconditional love, you can project the loudest about Jesus and his love for his people. That is one of the best ways I know to do it. And so I see that happen in these ladies. And as Naomi is characterized by tears, is changing her name to bitterness, and think there's no chance for her. Chapter 1 wraps up with this dark situation where Naomi thinks there's no chance left. But the very last verse of chapter 1 says they leave back for Bethlehem, where they first kind of started. And it's the time of the year where the barley harvest is about to begin. And that there will be hope for them in this situation. So these two ladies, they travel together. Again, there is no food. They have no necessarily home to go back to. And so they get back to, we pick up in chapter 2, they get back to Bethlehem. And so I don't know where they're staying, where they're sleeping, but Ruth gets up early in the morning and goes out to one of the fields. Again, it's harvest time, and so she knows that they kind of have this scenario where that you can glean the leftover crops. So after all the crops are gathered up, you can still go and kind of pick what's left and just basically pick up scraps to provide food for yourself. And so if you're homeless, that's a scenario that many people did. In fact, there was other people that would do this. And so Ruth decides to get up and pursue what she can for food, even in a situation that's pretty grim and doesn't look all that good. And so she gets up and she goes and she finds herself in this field and she starts collecting the scraps of the harvest that's left over. And she's noticed by the owner of the field. And so he inquires as he sees different people, but Ruth gets his attention. She's something that catches his eye in a very different way, and he's very attracted to her. Boaz is our character that finds this woman very attractive. But what happens next is really cool, because he doesn't just kind of go to her right away, kind of ask like, hey, does anybody, any of his workers, you guys know who this is? Like, I kind of want to figure this out. This is a good girl. I want to figure what's going on here. And so he starts asking. They say, yeah, actually, that's Ruth. She's connected to Naomi, and they came after they were Moabites. They lived there, but this whole thing happened. They lost their family, and so now they're here. And he's blown away by that Ruth, like, she stayed with Naomi even after all that, and now they're back here. And so because of her choice to stay with her mother-in-law, that gets Boaz's attention now to go out and have a conversation with her and really take this relationship to the next level. And that, to me, I kind of had to pause and look at it and say, man, in a love story, that's really refreshing. That what got his attention was her integrity, not her looks. Like, man, the fact that he was like, okay, she got my attention, first of all. She's a beautiful girl. What's going on? But when he kind of does a little bit of research and find out that she's someone of character, someone of integrity, that she would choose to stay with Naomi even in that situation, didn't look like it would benefit her at all, that now he's like, okay, now I got to go see what's going on, because what's inside of her is so much more attractive. And I love that about this. And so he introduces himself and says, listen, you can, whatever you want to collect. In fact, let me give you some more of my own, and you can take this home with you so you have food. And in fact, you should stay here and work. I'll make sure you're protected and people don't harm you. You can stay and be a part of this field and this harvest if you like. I want you to be protected and be safe. So she says, yeah, this is great. And he says to her that your reputation precedes you, that I know what you've done for your mother-in-law, and the Lord will bless you. And so this is a pretty cool situation for her to go back to Naomi and tell her what's happened. And so that's kind of chapter 2, and I want to pause on that because some of the text in here is so cool. Even the phrases that verse 2, chapter 2 says that it just so happened that Ruth was in the field where Boaz was. And it just kind of worked itself out where this man of integrity himself, and we're going to hear more about him in a second, would see her on this day in the middle of this crazy situation, and things would change drastically for Ruth in the middle of this just kind of happenstance. Now, what's really, really neat about this book altogether is there is very little overwhelming kind of Old Testament God miracle here, right? Like, there isn't a parting of the Red Sea. There's integrity is the miracle. There isn't like a pillar of fire. There's commitment. There's choices that ordinary people make that makes this story in the middle of all these crazy Old Testament phenomenal stories so important. That in fact, God is kind of a minor character in this. As far as his emphasis and his intervening in the situation, it is the choices these people make that makes this story so powerful. And so the point I want to make is whatever it was that made Ruth get up in the middle of the morning or, first thing in the morning and go out and collect food and try and make a life for herself, to make something happen out of a really difficult situation, there's something about that. there's this integrity that I'm still very much trying to figure out, but it seems like when people decide to get up even when they don't want to and do the best they can with the day they have, God's in the middle of that. And so there's no way that Ruth or Naomi would have known that this would be Boaz's field and that he would be a good guy, but she got up anyway and she started her day, and it just so happened that behind all of that stuff that didn't look like it was going to get better for either of these two women, that God was in the middle of that. And sometimes that's just kind of the way God wants to teach us. And it'd be nice if it was the booming voice from the cloud, but sometimes it is in your decision to keep moving forward that He is there with you the whole time. I read an author that said that sometimes you need to do what you can't see to experience what you can't understand. And that is what happens in our life with our God. Because there'll be days that you don't know what's going to happen next. And sometimes it's really difficult. And I can't even imagine the tension and the stress that Ruth was under. But she made that decision to get up and start the day. And meanwhile, all of a sudden, look what happens in her life. She meets this guy that has integrity, that wants to make her life better. And so it just helps me to stop and think, you know what? Sometimes I ask God for the miracle of the big reveal and to Him do all these things when He for a reason told this story, because He wanted to remind us that it doesn't need to be some extraordinary show to get our attention, that He works in the regular, He works in the ordinary, He works behind the scenes in our midst all the time to move us in ways that we can't even comprehend for the good of the kingdom and for our future. And I love that. And so they rejoice. They meet together. That hey, I was out in the field and I definitely got some leftovers, but I got a whole lot more. And she comes back with a bag of food, and this is going to be really, really good for us. And so Naomi's like, well, yeah, that's great. Like, where'd you go? What field was this? Oh, it was a man named Boaz. He was really kind to me. He said I could stay there. I could work there too, and I could have food. She's like, wait a minute, Boaz? Like, I know who that is, because Naomi, when she was married, they lived in Bethlehem. That's where she grew up, and then they went to Moab. And that's when everything bad happened, lost her husband, her two sons, and she came back here. And so she knew who Boaz was. They were, in the text, this guardian redeemer, a kinsman redeemer. And so she's like, this could be really, really good for us. Because if we're attached to Him, we can be redeemed, we can be restored. And so there's this there's this plot that's hatched, and they have this idea that if Ruth could get a little bit closer to Boaz, that maybe there could be a relationship, and this could go really, really well. And so they do. Boaz and Ruth, they develop a relationship and kind of working together and having this time together. And so Naomi has this crazy plan. She says, listen, what I want you to do is the harvest is just about over. They've collected all that they need to, and so there's going to be a big old party at the end of that. There's going to be a lot of drinking. Everyone's going to be really happy. And so if you want to get Boaz's attention, this would be the right time to go do it. And so what I want you to do, and this is Naomi talking to Ruth, at the right time during that party, the very end of it, when he's sleeping, I want you to go find where he's at. In fact, I want you to take a shower, get the best perfume we've got on, and get dressed up as best you can. And I want you to, you're going to impress him. And so, but here's the catch: is go to him when he's sleeping. And this is so crazy that wherever he's at, I want you to uncover the blanket off of his feet and then just lay down at his feet. And that's what I want you to do. And then he'll do the rest, it says in the text. And Ruth's like, okay, all right, that's what I'll do. And she does every step of it. She shows up at the end of the party and wait till he's sleeping. And she goes, and here's the deal. Extremely dangerous situation, right? Like, again, there's a lot of honor in this society. There's a lot of, why would a woman sneak into this guy's room at night? Like, this could be really dangerous as well. And so she just kind of does. And here's the deal, too. And he's sleeping and has his feet uncovered, and she lays at his feet. For a lot of you, being woken up in the middle of the night by someone's kind of crazy, especially if you got kids, right? Like, they just kind of like right in front of you, and they usually wake her up because I don't wake up, so they wake Jamie up. But I hear all those stories, man, about kids right in front of your face when you wake up, and it's not always the nicest kind of reaction. So Boaz, he's kind of nice about what happens, and so she wakes him up, and he's like, oh, who are you? And here's, to translate this is just crazy, but she says, yeah, it's me, it's Ruth. You should cover up your feet and then cover me up too with a blanket because you're our kinsman redeemer. And then just kind of like sees what he's going to do. And if I can translate that in a way, she's basically saying, hey, yeah, like if you cover me up with your blanket, then it would be like I could be part of your family because you could bring us back into the family. And if you're up for it, you should ask me to marry you because I would totally marry you and this would work out. So she's kind of insisting that there's a way out of this. So to wake him up in the middle of the night, say, hey, if you want it, you should ask me to marry you because I'll say yes. And then like that's the plan. I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, but it blows me away because she didn't have to do this. Again, it was a dangerous situation. Naomi kind of presented something that was crazy, and Naomi didn't say all that stuff. She just said, get to his feet, and the rest will kind of take care of itself. And so she does something that was bold. It was risky. It was dangerous. And that to me, man, I just think when I think about my relationship with people, my relationship with God, man, is there times where I should be more bold for my faith? That I should be more bold in the way I do anything? I think this story has a pretty neat kind of flow to it and a beauty to it, but I love the boldness and this seizing the moment that Ruth has in her. And I think that's one of the miracles of the book, is that she would be the type of person where there is a situation for her that she jumps at the opportunity. And here's the deal. Because that kinsman redeemer is such a big idea. Because that's such an important part of the puzzle. And I want to explain that part because that's a big thing. In this world, the way things would work is if, as Naomi was widowed and her husband dies, then another family member can come in and redeem the situation. So what happened is that Naomi's husband died, they left, and so that property, all their possessions, that he had, the husband that died, it would get sold, it would get taken to other places. But a kinsman redeemer or guardian redeemer, they have this really cool opportunity where they, as part of the family, they can show up and say, hey, I'm going to buy back the land and I'm going to marry her, the widow. And even if it's already sold, you have to sell it back to me. So regardless of death, I'm part of the family. I can redeem this and I want to pay for the land and I need to take her back too. And so there's this really cool thing that families can do because families are so important in the Old Testament. My goodness. And so there's this redeeming possibility. And so as Naomi realizes who Boaz is, there's this kinsman redeemer opportunity. He's part of the family, and she's lost. Ruth is lost, is in a rough situation. But if he jumps in, if Boaz jumps in to marry Ruth, then they can be redeemed. The property can be bought back. They can be restored to the way that they were before. And this would give them back a life that they never had before. And now they get something that would be even better. And this kinsman redeemer idea is a pretty powerful description that Boaz gets to have. And it's something that you and I see a couple times in Scripture, but this idea that when you go through loss, and then when you are by yourself or you're in a situation that you would name yourself bitterness, and that you would be overwhelmed with tears every day, there is a redeemer that's out there, right? There is a kinsman redeemer that says, this will cost me a lot to buy back this, but I will do that. And that you've been bought back, and that you've been redeemed. But here's what's so cool about what she does. You and I, most of us, we know that. We have been bought back, and we know what kinsman redeemer I'm talking about. But she chases after it. She knows that, hey, if I go talk to him in the middle of the night in a crazy situation, I think hope can come for me and for her. And I want that. And so when's the last time you, with confidence and boldness, chased after that kinsman redeemer in your life? Because you know he's there for you, right? You know that he's done all those things, but so many times we get caught up with, maybe just not today. Maybe I'm not all that worth to him. And that she would choose with boldness to come after the king that sets her free. And I think for us, there's a lesson in that with our relationships with each other and with other people. That he has done all that he's done for us. And he has redeemed us back into his family, and we get to be a part of that. But sometimes we don't chase after it ourselves. There is a marriage here. There's a relationship. It happens for Boaz and Ruth, and it happens for us, and we get to choose how we interact with that husband of ours, with that relationship we have, because we're the church, and he's the head of the church, and so we're married to him, and so he has made his bride absolutely beautiful. and done things to make the church who we are and given us gifts that we don't deserve and just given us blessings every step of the way. But how often do we chase after him and pursue him with a boldness and say, where you go, I will go. I want to be where you're at. Your people are my people. I'm going to be with you to the very end. And the story just gets even better from there because they do have this awkward scenario. And so Boaz says, yes, I'm gonna figure this out. And this is so cool because with integrity, this is very important. He has this beautiful woman come to him in the middle of the night. There's not a sexual issue here. And he just says, I'm going to do this the right way. And the next morning, I'm going to go to, we'll say, the court. And I'm going to talk because I understand the family dynamic. And I understand also that I'm a kinsman redeemer, but there's actually someone in the family that's closer to Naomi and Ruth than I am. So because he's related a little closer as far as family dynamic to you guys, he has the first right to buy this back. And so I need to give him that honor, which that's incredible. That's integrity. That's loyalty. In fact, it sounds kind of like what Ruth has for her mom. And it's almost like when you choose to live a life of integrity and loyalty, you won't always see it come back, but it will. You won't always know that integrity is going to get you somewhere, but at the end, there will be another person. There will be another day where someone else says, I see that. And it might not be in this place, but it will come back. And so Boaz, with great integrity, goes back and says, hey, listen, if someone else wants to, that is their right. I would love to. Like, I love this girl. This situation will work better for me. And so gives this other guy that's kind of first in line an opportunity. And so he kind of learns about it and sees how beautiful Ruth is, and he's like, yeah. And then he kind of finds out that she's a Moabite, that she comes from a different tribe, and I should have set this up before, but Moabites and Israelites, like, straight up enemies, not cool with each other. That's Judges stuff. In fact, they go to war again after this, and so they don't really like each other. So this guy that was first in line kind of realizes who she is and says, no, I don't want nothing to do with that. That's only going to tarnish and stain my reputation. Have at it. So Boaz is like, perfect. Then let's do this. And they decide to get married. And so Boaz and Ruth are married. And now in chapter 4, you see that Naomi is now okay with being acknowledged as Naomi. She kind of understands that things have changed in her life. And Ruth and Boaz, they have a son. His name's Obed. And he's in the line. Obed grows up, he has a son. His son's name is Jesse. Jesse grows up, and his son's name is David. And that's our King David. And so this relationship, this marriage is in the line of our King Jesus Christ. And it's just really cool how that works. I want to get to that in a second. But as the baby is born and the people are celebrating what happens, a woman, just as a woman, comes up to Ruth and congratulates her, or comes up to Naomi and congratulates her, says, man, God's been good to you. He looks at Ruth, and you were better off having her than 7 sons. That you could have had maybe the sons that you think give you success, but this woman who is committed to you, man, that's something else, right? And so this relationship between Boaz and Ruth, they have this son, and the son has a son, and it's a pretty incredible thing where they find themselves in the genealogy of our Lord Jesus Christ. And you kind of look at the genealogy, or at least I do sometimes, it's kind of tough, and there's some very, very interesting things about that. Specifically, a lot of the characters that show up, and so Ruth is named in that list, and she again was a Moabite that most people didn't want anything to do with. You find Bathsheba in that list, who had made some bad choices too. You find Rahab, who was a prostitute in Jericho. There's a lot of these people that you would think would qualify as unqualified, that they would be unworthy, but in fact, he likes to specialize in the unworthy to make them worthy. And in the same place, this Bethlehem, where, again, strategically, God would choose the unworthy to make worthy and come and bring his son in the long line of descendants in a manger. And so it's like, man, God really likes to use the unworthy to do things to change our world. And in this story, this unworthy Ruth, this woman of a different bloodline of the Moabites, God works, and again, there's no big miracle here. It's a love story between some people, and they make choices, and some things go right and some things go wrong. And so in the middle of these big wars and all these stories, you see this little love story, and it shows us a lot of things. And I love what this woman here in chapter 4 says to Naomi, that you were better off having her, this woman, Ruth, in your life than if you had 7 sons to carry on your name. And so I think about Ruth, and that she really had a deep friendship where I can't imagine the impact that has on Naomi and what that meant for her. And she has this integrity and she has this loyalty about her. And this getting up in the morning even when she doesn't want to, and to go just kind of see what God might have in store, and this opportunity to be a part of the kinsman redeemer. And I look at all these things that I see in her life, and I just wonder how much of that I can apply to myself now. I just wonder what that really teaches me about discipleship, that just maybe loyalty is kind of a big deal. That maybe just maybe the ones that everyone else thinks are unworthy are worthy. That maybe just maybe we're part of a bigger family that can redeem and have a role in other people's lives. And maybe, just maybe, the choice to be friends with someone at a level that you would commit to them even when they offer you no blessing in return, maybe that would help me to worry about how you live your life with other people. And that you would be someone that is characterized by integrity, by true deep friendship, that you would be someone of loyalty and boldness, and that you would be in an opportunity, if it ever presents itself, to be a kind of kinsman redeemer where you see someone that is left without and say, there is room in my family for you because I know who can buy you back and bring you into the fold and give you a life that you didn't deserve. And that's the kind of family I want to be a part of. That's the kind of relationships I want to have with other people. And so I challenge you to keep reading the books. Keep listening to God, because these great stories, as simple as they are in nature and as underwhelming as they can seem, God will work and teach you all the time some powerful, powerful things. So let me pray for you, and we're gonna leave with another song for you. I love you, God, like crazy. I thank you for Ruth and her example. I thank you for the bloodline. I thank you for all the ways that you continue to teach me about how you select us, how you like our shortcomings, and how you specialize in our weakness. God, I thank you so much that you would use people like her and people like us. God, thank you for the parts of the story I comprehend and the ones I don't. I still got a lot of questions about all that stuff, and I'm grateful that you kind of guide us through. And so I pray you continue to help us to learn the lessons, because, man, I've read the book before. I know what the book of Ruth is about, but I didn't know a lot of that stuff. And so thank you, God, for teaching us, teaching me. I pray, God, we would continue to seek you out. And in every relationship that we have, God, that we would do that relationship the way you want us to. Please help us to love people the way you've loved us first. Help us with unconditional love and some deep friendships proclaim on the highest mountain in the loudest voice about your love that set us free. Let us be spokespersons. Let us be ambassadors. Let us be loud voices of the King. We love you, God, and thank you for what you've done for us. The story that set us free and changed our lives forever, God. You're the best. We love you. So in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Sing this with us, please.